All right, we're going to begin. Good afternoon, and thank you for attending this news conference regarding the 1976 homicide of Evelyn Colon. The Troop N Criminal Investigation Unit has utilized the Pennsylvania Crime Stoppers tip line to receive tips directly for this case. Although an arrest was made, as with any other ongoing criminal investigations, we encourage and welcome any tips that people may have to help this case. You can see this board here. It has the Crime Stoppers number. It is 1-800-4PA-TIPS. That's 1-800-472-8477. And anybody can reference case number 1956. Although we will take questions at the end of this news conference, one important fact to remember is that this investigation is still ongoing with an arrest made. We will not be able to answer some questions you ask, and we do not want to jeopardize the integrity of the prosecution phase of this case. I will now turn over to Lieutenant Devin Brutowski, Troop N Criminal Section Unit Commander.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the media for attending and all others who are participating in this event. I'd like to thank Commonwealth media experts for setting up our audio and video presentation. I believe they're live streaming also. I'd like to start off by saying this is an unusual case for PSP, and the identification of Evelyn Colon and the arrest of Mr. Sierra could not have been accomplished without assistance. Over the past 44 years, numerous agencies have assisted us with funding, evidence analyzation, and case review. Among those agencies and assistance that we received are on this board here. Of course, the Carbon County District Attorney Michael Greek, the Coroner's Office from Carbon County, DNA Labs International from Florida, Ortham Incorporated from Texas, University of North Texas and NAMUS, Dr. Jana Andronowski. 44 years ago, Trooper Frank Grippy was the original investigating officer, and it followed through 44 years to Trooper Van Wee and Trooper Knoll, who ultimately made the arrest of Mr. Sierra. This was a complete team effort. Numerous agencies and more than 100 troopers over the years have worked on this case, including myself. I was part of the exhumation in 2007 when we removed Miss Colon and her baby to get DNA evidence. We're elated that we could bring this to a conclusion, and what I want to do for everybody here today is I'm going to go through a little bit of a case presentation as to how this case came about and the steps we've taken over the years in being able to accomplish this. So on December 20th, 1976, a teenager was playing near the Lehigh River, Eastside Borough, Carbon County. He discovered a dismembered body and a nearly full-term fetus. The state police were called, evidence was collected, and ultimately an autopsy was completed, and the manner of death was ruled a homicide by likely strangulation, and there was also a gunshot wound noted to the neck of the dismembered female. They believed the adult victim to be between 14 and 20 years of age. They made some significant notes. There was a scar on her left leg. There were some other distinguishing marks on her face. From that point, additional evidence at the scene had been collected, tested, and preserved throughout the years. And the case was entered into the NCIC Identified Person Record. NCIC is the National Crime Information Center. And what we do with that is it sends out multiple notices to other agencies with characteristics and descriptions of our case, so others can look at it and possibly give us information of who we may be looking at, who we can identify the victim as. As we know, through the 80s and 90s, there wasn't much accomplished. DNA evidence didn't come about until the 90s. And we mostly received tips, followed tips on different missing persons, and attempted to identify them as Miss Colon. All of those were discounted after investigation. The Pennsylvania State Police in the mid-1990s dedicated a full-time position for each troop for these types of investigations. It was called the Criminal Investigation Assessment Unit. That unit was developed to help review all cold cases, and it was helped to assist in major criminal investigations. Along with the development of our department's specialized unit, Technological advances were made in relating to DNA evidence. In 1998, the FBI created a DNA database called CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, which made it possible to collect DNA profiles, submit them to the system, and see if they link to anybody that could be missing or was put in from another department. So in 2007, Corporal McAndrew and Corporal Williams, both retired now, presented this case to the FBI VICAP service. That's the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. They attempted to get information that they could use to attempt to identify Ms. Colon. They reviewed the case, and they eventually came to the conclusion that we needed to retrieve DNA evidence. So in October 2007, at the time it was Jane Doe and Baby Doe, they were exhumed and re-examined by forensic experts. During the exhumation, DNA was collected and submitted for a profile. In November 2007, members of our department conducted a graveside funeral service and acted as pallbearers to give Jane Doe and Baby Doe, now Evelyn Colon, a proper burial. They served as pallbearers, and we conducted a service with clergy. The extractions for DNA were sent to the University of North Texas, and in January 2008, a profile was developed. The profile of Jane Doe was submitted to CODIS, which I briefly talked about before. In July 2011, all the case information was entered in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, which is NamUs. And that was also in hope of identifying Jane Doe or Ms. Colon. In June 2012, the case information was entered into NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, based on the fact that we thought it could be a 15-year-old or 16-year-old victim. In 2014, the University of South Florida provided an isotope analysis, and they reported evidence based on isotope analysis from within the body, saying what minerals could have been collected and found within the body, so we can locate a geographic location of where the victim might have been from. In late 2020 and in early 2021, DNA labs from Florida conferred with Ortham Labs to enhance the original DNA profile and use it to compare profiles in public databases. Some of those are like Family Tree DNA and other such databases. In March 2021, a DNA database match occurred. The match was from Louis Colon Jr., who told us, after we contacted him, that we should speak with his father, Louis Colon Sr., who lived in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. After numerous interviews with Mr. Colon and his sisters, it was determined that Jane Doe was their sister, Evelyn Colon. We conducted additional interviews, reviewed evidence in the case, and it eventually led us to Mr. Luis Sierra in Ozone Park, New York. He was the last person to have been with Evelyn, as they were living together in an apartment in Jersey City in 1976. After interviewing Mr. Sierra, we conferred with District Attorney from Carbon County, Michael Greek, and an arrest warrant for homicide was approved and filed. Just yesterday, Mr. Sierra was extradited from New York, and he was transported to the Carbon County Prison, where he'll await his preliminary hearing and then eventually trial. Since 1976, I stated before, there have been over 100 state police investigators that worked this case, along with others that have helped us. And everybody was instrumental in identifying Ms. Colon and the eventual arrest of Mr. Sierra. I'd like to thank all those involved. I'd like to thank the Colon family, Luis Sr. and his sisters, and the nephew who put his information into the database that allowed us to be at this point today. We'll take some questions afterwards, but I'm going to turn it over to District Attorney Michael Greek. As you can see, the Pennsylvania State Police has never stopped working on this case, as we do with all our cases. Each victim does matter to us, and we will take all appropriate measures and actions and do as much investigation as we can to bring every case to a conclusion.
Good morning. First, I'd like to commend Lieutenant Bertosky, Trooper Knoll, Sergeant Stefanik, Trooper Van Wee, and all the present and past troopers assigned to Troop N Criminal Investigation Unit over the past 44 years whose hard work and perseverance made the identification of Evelyn Colon and her daughter possible, and bring at least some level of closure to her family, to what was a tragic and long-standing mystery. I'm proud to be associated with these dedicated men and women who never gave up on this case. Obviously, this was a difficult case. That's the reason why they're called cold cases. They're difficult to solve in the first place. The advances in science have finally enabled the identification of the victims. And now, as with any criminal case, it always helps to have more information. And I would encourage anyone that has any information to utilize the tip line. Luis Sierra of Ozone Park was charged with 1 count of criminal homicide. Charge was filed shortly after his interview with Trooper Knoll in New York, where he was taken into custody. This office was preparing a governor's warrant for extradition to Pennsylvania when we were notified that he willingly waived extradition and is here at the Carbon County Correctional Facility. Preliminary hearing is tentatively scheduled for April 28th. The factual basis for the charges is set forth in the probable cause affidavit of the criminal complaint, so I will not comment or elaborate any further on those facts. And any further decisions, I'm going to be meeting with the Pennsylvania State Police on any additional charges and other matters relating to this case. Thank you.
We're seeing more and more of these ancestry DNA type things help solve cases. Can you talk about what that means for the future of solving cold cases like this?
I believe it's a very bright future for that. By us submitting DNA and that getting put into the public databases, which I believe have tens of millions of people in there, it does help us identify other people. We do have other cases right now that we're working on with that in mind, other cold cases. So I believe it helps all law enforcement agencies, and it's the future of what we're doing and able to solve the cold cases.
Can you talk about how the prosecution will proceed?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you talk a little bit about how the prosecution will proceed? The laws were different in '76, obviously. What kind of penalty does he face? Might be for the DA.
Well, obviously, factually, the law in 1976 would apply to the criminal homicide. So we have that in place, and we're going to talk with the state police on any additional charges and evaluating what 76 other charges would apply. This was what we did in this case is what we felt we had enough of criminal homicide as a result of the interview, and that was the original charge that was brought. So any further decisions will be made in collaboration with the state police.
But for sentences, I know, was there no death penalty in '76 in Pennsylvania? Will that apply?
We're still making a decision regarding that and making our arguments for that.
Also, do you have any information about whether she was killed in Pennsylvania or killed elsewhere and dumped here? Have you established that yet?
We'd rather not talk about any of those specifics regarding this case, other than what's in the affidavit.
Do you have any information to release on what Mr. Sierra was doing for 44 years while she was nameless?
What we do know about him right now is that he did have a job. He was a bus driver where he's at now in Ozone Park, or where he was at the time we interviewed him. Anything further than that, we just can't get into at this time.
I don't know if you can kind of walk back and explain how after 44 years, when you got this vital piece of information that would lead to her identity, what were all of you thinking?
I was elated. Again, I worked on this case in 2007. And I worked with Corporal McAndrew and Corporal Williams on this. Being able to bring conclusion to a case from that long ago is something I've always done. I was a criminal investigator before I was in charge, so that's near and dear to my heart. And I think that's with anybody here. I mean, if you take the people that are working for me now, none of us were alive when this happened, but we're still willing to move forward and try and solve these cases. So it was a form of elation, and but then the work has to be done.
I have two questions. One for you guys. Can you just explain how things were different back in '76 for just you guys investigating, how it was different from today?
I think when you're talking in terms of evidence, number one, DNA is a huge advancement in criminal investigation. If you're talking about processing a scene, We typically do that the same. We may take more pictures now. We use videography instead of just photos. Obviously, you're talking about better photo quality. Processing things have come a long way for blood evidence, anything of that nature. But DNA is the big improvement. And as I went through the list there, you know, from 76 up until the 90s, we relied on tips from other agencies saying, hey, this could possibly be so-and-so. And guys like we have sitting here that worked there, they ran these tips down. And that took a lot longer because you didn't have the evidence from a lab and these databases to compare to. So they had to do a lot more legwork than we do now. So I would say it was actually a little bit harder back then than what we have it now.
And my second question is for the DA. 2 people were killed that day. Do you think that a second count of criminal homicide will be included?
That's one of those things that we have to address. Obviously, in 1976, the laws were different, didn't provide for a homicide of an unborn child. So there's other investigative tools we're using now to determine whether a charge could be made for that case.
So you guys are still looking for tips with the tip line and everything. Can you talk a little bit more about what type of information you might still be looking for to help with, you know, finding out more about this case?
We're not asking for other information that we need. We're just asking for peripheral information that helps. I mean, it's always good to have the big picture of somebody's life and everything they've done. But as far as the crime being committed, that's not really what we're asking for, if that helps you out at all. We're just looking for peripheral information that, you know, people may have that says, hey, so-and-so knows this guy and this is what he did from 76 to 80 or something like that. But if you're talking for the offense, no, we're not really asking for that. We have what we need. But if you're talking for peripheral, for the big picture, that's what we're looking for.
Thank you.
When you went to Ozone Park and met Mr. Sierra, was he cooperative? I know the story changed a few times, but can you just kind of reiterate what happened there?
Again, ongoing investigation. I don't want to get too far into it, but I believe he was very cooperative, spoke with us. We won't get into the details of it, but yeah, I mean, he was cooperative at the time.
Did the DNA show that it was his baby?
We can't get into the investigation part of that right now.
Any priors, any other criminal past?
Again, I don't want to talk about that right now with the ongoing investigation. I understand you were looking for that, but it's just something we just can't release or do right now.
How did Evelyn's family react when you told them?
They were elated. However, the grisly details, of course, was upsetting to them. But they're happy that they have put an end to wondering where she was all these years, and then knowing, unfortunately, the baby was dead too. I do believe they gave the baby a name, but they were very happy. They thanked us because they know it's 44 years and we were still working on the case. But again, the grisly details, I don't think that was something anybody was thinking would be coming out of that.
Did the family ever say why they never looked? I mean, I know that he had there's a letter. Did they ever say why they didn't pursue a little bit harder to look for their missing family member?
They've talked about it. I would leave that on them to explain to you. I don't think I should speak for them.
So if you guys believe that Luis Sierra is the person that did this, are you guys concerned that he could have murdered other people?
That's nothing we've discussed yet. We're focused in on this case, so I don't think we've even discussed that fact yet.
Reporting a missing person, I did speak with the family. They said they did try to report her missing, but because of the letter, they weren't able to report them missing because police told them that because of that letter, they weren't able to do it. So can you just talk a little bit about the policy for reporting a missing person? If you did have some sort of evidence saying that she wasn't missing, whether true or not, would that, like today, if they were to report someone missing today, would that impede with that?
Today would be much different. I believe in 1976, our department takes all missing persons. There is the myth out there that you have to wait 48 hours or anything like that. That's not true. We do a missing person declaration as part of our policy in our department. So if you have a person that's missing, you can declare them missing based on certain criteria. It doesn't necessarily have to be a nefarious reason. It would just be, maybe you think they're going to hurt themselves or there's other issues out there. But we will take all missing person reports, and you could file the declaration for that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a mugshot available for us?
We didn't receive any mugshot. He was taken and there was a preliminary arraignment before a magistrate, but we don't have a mugshot at this time.
Will there be one at some point? I'm not sure. I don't usually cover Carbon County.
Our office has generally not released mugshots. That would either come from the prison or from the magistrate's office.
Is he married?
I'm not going to get into those details right now.
We appreciate you coming out for this important news conference that we held today. We want to send the message that the Pennsylvania State Police cares about every one of its investigations and every one of our victims. Whether that crime occurs today or it happened in 1976, we will use every advancement in technology that we can to help solve these crimes and bring closures to families. Thank you.